From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. Is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And once again, hello out there on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. And we'll be here for a while. All right, today it is Friday, a cold day in the city of New Orleans, wherever you are watching us. Hope you are enjoying your Friday as you get into a very, very, very fun sports weekend, or just weekend in general. If you're in the holiday spirit, because there's Christmas music everywhere, and it's red and it's green, it's all over the place. So a good weekend ahead. This show, we talk about the Saints, and they are heading to North Jersey, to face the New York Giants, a team they are better than, a team they should defeat. So we will go with that, with the big picture, an angle of that in just a second. But how are you feeling today on this Friday?
You know, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling ready and prepared. Because, see, last Friday, I went out and I shot the Carr versus St. Thomas More football game. It was cold, and I wasn't ready for the cold just yet. But today, I brought out all the gear I had in Ohio. I brought out the big jacket. I got the gloves. I'm ready for the cold tonight.
Dude,
I'm going to Shaw Madison
saw
Prep.
Shaw Madison, that's going to make a game. I saw you walking to the office. I thought you were, like, ready for a blizzard. I was like, you good, Andre? I mean, that's quite a coat you got there.
Hey, look, I won't feel any cold tonight. I know that for sure.
I'm gonna swing by to a game or two tonight. Semifinals in the prep football playoffs in the state of Louisiana. So a big weekend. Some really good teams playing tonight. All right, here we are, Friday, day before Week 14 in the NFL for the Saints. Game number 13 for the Saints. And they face the New York Football Giants. And, you know, we go through these weeks and certain topics kind of become inevitable to discuss. Other topics you have to look a little deeper at to see. But I thought this was a pretty good time to check in, because the season gets going. We talk about this person a lot. The season gets going, and then you don't really have kind of a checkup on it. So I thought it was a good time in the calendar, and just given how everything has gone, to check in on Klint Kubiak and how we see that experiment going, how it has gone, and has it been what the Saints had hoped for? I figured, why not? That would be a good spot to go with the big picture today.
Yeah, you know, when you look at the Saints, their roster, their coaching staff, there are some people that everybody thinks unanimously is doing a great job. There are some people who everybody thinks we could get a little more out of. And then there are some people where it's split.
That's a good point.
It's a little bit divisive. Some people think he's doing great. Some people think he's not doing a good job. And to me, Klint Kubiak is one of those people. So as we look at the Saints season so far, Sean, has Klint Kubiak delivered?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just not so obvious because of so much of the circumstances working against them that they really had no control over. So as big as he was going into the season, at the start of the season, it's faded a little bit, and you just, okay, was the fading due to his own, lack of competency or his own, failures, or was it because of the circumstances around him? But the Klint Kubiak experiment began as the biggest offseason addition for the Saints football team. He was supposed to be the missing link, and it marked a major shift from the Peyton Breeze Carmichael approach to offense to the Kubiak, Shanahan, wide zone, bootleg system that has taken over the league. Now Kubiak is about to enter his 13th game, calling plays for the New Orleans Saints. Been through a lot. I mean, he signed up for Dennis Allen to be his head coach. And guess what? Dennis Allen ain't the head coach no more. Now he's had a few games with Rizzy. That's why I wanted to check in at this point, because it's been a decent enough sample size from both coaches. And there's still a decent amount of time left in this season. I mean, it feels, you get to this point and your team's not doing well, it feels like it's almost over, but you still have 5 more games left. This is a nice, sizable chunk of the season left. So we will revisit this topic when the season ends, I can promise you, because we'll have a full season worth of data. But the facts, And circumstances matter a ton here when you dive into the Klint Kubiak experiment. No QB1 for 3 games. No starting center for 10 games. No wide receiver 1 for 4 games and counting. We'll see how long Chris Olave is actually out. No wide receiver 2 for 6 games and counting. That'll end up being, 11 games when the season's finally over. No Mr. Versatility for what will be a total of 9 games. By the way, Taysom Hill officially goes on IR today. As you know, his season is officially over. So when I added all that up, when I thought this topic was going, we were going to go this direction with this topic, I started just kind of, okay, we don't have Olave, you don't have Shaheed, you don't have Carr, you don't have McCoy, you don't have Lucas Patrick. For sizable amounts of time, significant chunks of time throughout the season, and immediately I start to kind of develop statistically where he might end up being in my head. Realistically, where would this offense be ranked? The truth is, I haven't really looked. I don't know how you do this, but every opponent I look at where they're at rankings wise. But for some reason, I haven't really gone there with the Saints offense just because of all the injuries. It just kind of felt like it was going to have one big fat asterisk next to it. Asterisk. I didn't say the other word. It just felt like it was going to be distorted. I thought at best, honestly, just total offense-wise, Kubiak's offense, given where they'd been, the up and down would be 18th or 19th. And honestly, under those circumstances, I would have considered that decent. Then I looked at the numbers today, and the numbers say something different. The Saints' total offense is not 19th in the NFL. They are 12th in total offense. And of the 11 teams ahead of them, only one team, the Green Bay Packers, had their starting quarterback out for a significant amount of time like the Saints did. The Saints scoring offense, 14th in the NFL, so top half of the NFL. And that's when they had 5 games where they scored 14 points or less. Rushing offense, something this offense is built upon. We know the ups and downs with the second running back and the offensive line, yet still 10th in the NFL in running the football. Despite all the trials and all the tribulations, it's still a top 10 rushing offense, and thank goodness for that because it's built upon running the football. It's the whole point of the scheme. Passing. Now, look, this is where the dip comes in because, look, Carr's absence was immediate. There was a couple games even with Carr where the passing game didn't get going. Spencer Rattler really struggled. So I was expecting worse than 19th, yet here they are, 19th in the NFL in passing offense. Not good, below average, but I just, considering the dry spells they went through, I thought they would have been like 24th or 25th in the NFL.
When they were rolling, Carr was like, even against the Cowboys, I think he threw for 176.
It wasn't a whole lot of big chunk passing yard days. Yeah. And we know injuries happen everywhere, so I'm not going to give Kubiak a complete pass. But all things being considered, in the games where starting center 1, Eric McCoy, combined with starting quarterback 1, Derek Carr, were on the field together. It only happened 3 times. They went 3-0. Average margin of victory of well over 20 points, 42 points a game average, and 193 rushing yards a game. Pretty good numbers. But the problem is it only happened 3 times so far this year. For those not watching, for those hearing, that is a knock on wood that McCoy and Carr stay on the field together. McCoy is back this week. Carr, as far as we know, is fully healthy, and hopefully nothing happens to him. Again, knock on wood the rest of the way. But, so if they stay together in 3-0, I mean, they may not be undefeated the rest of the way because it was the Panthers, the Cowboys, and the Browns. But still, the obvious thing is this. It gives you a glimpse at perhaps what kind of season this could have been if just those 2 players, forget all the other injuries, forget Taysom, even though Taysom matters a whole lot, forget Olave, Shaheed, all those guys. If you just had those 2 for the majority of the season, which on the field together for the majority of the season, obviously Carl only missed 3 games, they win at least... They win more games. One of the with or without McCoy, with Carr back for those 3 games they missed, I think they win at least 1 more game. With McCoy and obviously Carr on the field together, they may have won all 3 based off the last 3, the only 3 games that they played together. Both on the field at the same time during that stretch. So I do think that mattered. Carr, McCoy mattered, the whole entire Kubiak experiment. But we got to be real. Let's be real. this team is 4-8, and they have had significant stretches of poor offensive play too many times this season for it to just be injuries and circumstances. Kubiak has to have his fair share of the blame. I have said this multiple times this season. Kubiak's biggest flaw as an offensive coordinator, in just a relatively short amount of time we've seen this season, is he struggles readjusting when a team adjusts to his initial game plan. It happened last week against the Rams. When a team kind of figures you out, you have to be able to counter. Or if they figure it out, hopefully you have a big enough lead to where they can't dig themselves out of the hole. Regardless, he has not been great at the readjusting to a team's adjustments, because you got your game plan. Does defense have a good enough game plan to stop your initial game plan? Then you adjust. But when you have a good game plan and then they adjust and you got to swing back, there's a cat and mouse game that goes there. Some of the great, some know how to do it, some don't. I just think Kubiak, for as good as he is in other areas, he has struggled there. And then stylistically, we talked about this a couple pods ago. I'm not sure this offense is one when you have to come back from more than, say, 10 points. It's built to do that because the element of play action gets less and less and less effective. And I think that really, really, really hamstrings him as a play caller. And you can almost feel it to where he is just trying and trying and trying. He just cannot find the magic when he does not have the option of running that fake bootleg that he likes to do with Derek Carr. So back to the original question. Has Kubiak delivered? I think the overall Kubiak experience has been a positive one. Respectable numbers despite terrible circumstances. Plus, look, let's be real. Derek Carr is playing well within this system, but he does have flaws. Yeah. Kubiak does have flaws. It's impossible to know if Kubiak is with the club next year, especially if they hire outside the organization. The likelihood that a new head coach comes in and keeps the offensive staff is just low. Most coaches like to come in and just clean house and bring their own guys and start from scratch. And honestly, I would say that's the overwhelming majority of coaches when new staffs in the NFL. However, if they stay with Rizzy, which who knows what jobs are going to be open when the season finally ends and where the Saints land on the hierarchy of those jobs and of those top candidates you want. If they turn down the Saints or don't want the Saints or go other places, where does Rizzy factor in? And does he have a realistic chance? I still think he does. I think Kubiak is back, and I think he's certainly earned that right. I don't think he's done anything to get fired, but I do think it would have been nice to have a little bit better circumstances. You can't get perfect circumstances in the NFL, but it would have been nice to have him a little bit better circumstances. But overall, it's been a decent year for Kubiak.
Has Klint Kubiak delivered? I say barely. I mean, if I had to rate him on a scale from 1 to 10, I'd give him about a 6. I think there's a lot of good that you can say about Kubiak, but there is a bit of bad that you can say about Kubiak, starting with one of the last things you said, him making adjustments. The Saints averaged 14 points in the first half, 9 points in the second half. The Saints offense
That's all year?
All year, over the course of the season, including...
Say that again. That's a good point.
14 points in the first half, 9 points in the second half, and that's including those offensive explosions in the early season against the Panthers and the Cowboys. So throughout the course of the season, the Saints offense has struggled in the second half compared to the first half, and a lot of that are halftime adjustments. Him being able to take the first punch that the defense may give him, but not being able to adjust to that second punch. That's on Klint Kubiak to a degree. Also, I know Derek Carr got hurt. I've got to put a little of the blame on him for not being able to get anything out of Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, that's fair.
If I had to guess, I don't know for sure, but if you had to guess, the decision to start Spencer Rattler, I'm sure the offensive coordinator had a little bit to do with that. Yeah. You could even take it a step further and say the offensive coordinator had a little bit to do with drafting Spencer Rattler.
No doubt.
Because Jake Haener was not a Klint Kubiak
He was not a Kubiak guy.
Jake Haener was from the previous regime with Pete Carmichael and Dennis Allen. Klint Kubiak had a hand in drafting Spencer Rattler. Klint Kubiak had a hand in choosing Spencer Rattler early in the week. I think it was the Wednesday that Dennis Allen just came out and said, hey, Rattler's our starter that week. Coming out and starting Spencer Rattler. So he was your choice. He was your guy. And in 3 starts, you were unable to get anything out of Spencer Rattler. To a degree, that's on Klint Kubiak's shoulders. And you can't necessarily ignore that.
Right.
Not to mention some of the situational football gaffes that this team has had, especially, I think, back to the Panthers. Having the ball, having a chance to win that game against Carolina, going on the drive, taking a deep shot on 4th and 3. Some of the play calling there has been questionable.
Even last week, the 4th down play in the game last week, I broke it down on game plan. That was not a 4th and short call that I would have made.
Yeah, exactly. So situational football, which honestly is the reason the Saints season is the way it is. It's not necessarily because the team's bad or good or anything. They have not played well in situations where they needed to play well at the end of games. They're 1-4 in one-score ball games. And since Derek Carr came back, the reason that they're losing those games is because the offense does have the ball at the end with a chance to win it, and they have not. Not to Kubiak's credit. Like you said, he was dealt a bad hand. Klint Kubiak signed up to play with Derek Carr, missed him for 3 games. Chris Olave, he's missed about half the season. Rashid Shaheed, he's missed most of the season. Taysom Hill, by the end of the year, he would have missed about half the season. You know, a lot of offensive linemen have been in and out, especially Eric McCoy, who's been out a lot more than he's been in. You know, the tight end situation hasn't necessarily been great. And then you mentioned the numbers. 2024, 12th in total offense, 14th in points per game. I looked back last year as well. They were 14th in total offense, 9th in points per game. This year, they're averaging 23 points a game. Last year, they averaged 23.6. That was with Pete Carmichael. But Pete Carmichael was playing with the starters.
With healthy guys, right?
Pete Carmichael had Olave, and he had Kamara.
Had Taysom and
he
Carr.
had Taysom. He had Rashid. He had Michael Thomas for a short stretch. The offensive line was relatively healthy. So they're essentially averaging the same amount of points this year with the Kevin Austins and Dante Pettises and all the Marquez Valdez-Scantlings and the Bub Meanses of the world than they did last year with a relatively healthy offense. Yards, they're averaging 8 more yards a game this year. So essentially the offenses are about the same.
I know they're running the ball better.
They're running the ball a lot better.
Yeah.
So the offenses are about the same, and Kubiak did it with an injured team. So you got to give him a little credit there. But where I would give Kubiak the most credit, and that's where it shifts from has Kubiak delivered yes or no, is with 2 people, Derek Carr and Alvin Kamara. Derek Carr himself has said multiple times over the last few weeks that he feels like he's playing the best football of his career. Derek Carr is a guy who, at the beginning of this year, we were talking about around the league, is Derek Carr going to be seen as a starter after this season? And you're still going to be talking about that by the end of the year. But Derek Carr has played well. We talked about it a few podcasts ago. All things considered, Derek Carr is doing a good job. But especially Alvin Kamara.
That's it.
The question the last few years has been, is Alvin Kamara washed? Is it time to move on from Alvin Kamara? Is Alvin Kamara worth the big money deal that he's holding out in mini camp for? He has unequivocally proven that he is still an elite running back in this league. The production that he's putting forth, not just running the ball, catching the ball, physically being able to carry the load of all the touches that he's being asked to take, because Jamal Williams has been hurt and Kendre Miller has been hurt and now Taysom Hill is hurt. The load that AK has carried after the last 2 years, which is essentially the worst 2 seasons of his career, being able to have that career resurgence under Klint Kubiak, he's got to be credited with that to a degree. I mean, your best 2 offensive weapons, Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, your offensive coordinator has gotten more out of them than the previous regime has. So I do give him credit for that. But you also got to take a few points away by the fact that they have struggled, particularly in second halves of the games, and that he was not able to get anything out of the Rattler experience.
Yeah, that's where I'm going to go with your point, because I think it's a good one. And honestly, I'm glad you went there because as I laid it out, I had kind of just looked at that as, that's a tough set of circumstances. But, as the guy that Jake Hanner was the 2 the entire season. And then all of a sudden it came time to devise a game plan and who you felt gave you the best chance to win. They went with Spencer Rattler and went pretty quickly with the confirmation of Spencer Rattler. And not just once, not just twice, 3 times. And after that second game, you didn't have to go with Rattler at that point. To the point you had to pull Rattler at that point. It was probably time for Hainer at that point. So that is a coaching decision that, I'm sure they're going to say it was collective, but I have no doubt Klint Kubiak had a huge role in deciding who he felt like he could win with. Speaking of coaching, there was a lot of tension middle of the season, obviously, because it felt like the DA question really started to linger by. I remember first saying with the DA situation at the end of the Denver game being like, this is the type of loss that makes you rethink the whole experiment. That was, what were they, 2-5 at that point?
Yeah.
So tension had really begun to mount at that point. Then into the following week, which was the Chargers game, and then the Panthers. Everyone was on pins and needles thinking. So there was a lot there inside that building that you have to deal with from a coaching standpoint, that whether or not it affected him, poorly or positively. It just felt like it didn't show up on the field with any sort of positive play from the offense, because like you said, that the Carolina game, they completely outplayed them. I mean, there's no business losing that game. And the situational playmaking, that was an awful play call on fourth down, much like the fourth down play against the Rams. It just would not have been the play I would have called in that scenario. But overall, what grade or where on the priority list do you put circumstance versus what he was actually able to do, and how do you balance that out? Because I still feel like if it were up to me and it was the same coaching staff coming back, I wouldn't get rid of him. I feel like I would want to see another year of Klint Kubiak with hopefully a cleaner bill of health and maybe just a little bit less cloudy circumstances from a head coaching standpoint, and maybe a few more reinforcements from free agency and the draft, and maybe you get a little better output. I would still bring him back for another year.
I would agree with that. Now, obviously, the coaching situation could vary when it comes to bringing Kubiak back.
Assuming the coaching staff stays the same. Right?
If it stays the same. If Kubiak put up this exact same production and numbers with a healthy team, I'd say I don't know about that. Mm-hmm. But considering the fact that he lost Taysom, he lost his best offensive lineman, he lost his wide receiver 1, his wide receiver 2, his wide receiver 3, his wide receiver 4 and 5, you gotta give him a little grace in that and say that despite losing all of that, the offense has at least kept games competitive for the majority of the season.
And I'll go one step further. I'll give you those injuries, but just give me back McCoy.
Yeah.
And see how it looks, because I kind of have a feeling that it still would look very good.
42 points a game.
And I still think they're getting scoring their points and winning the majority of those games. And not all of them, because obviously the games they won were against teams that all had losing records. But I still think they would play better if McCoy. All things being, if you just have one injury back, even if Carr's got to miss for 3 games, give him McCoy the entirety of the season and see how different the record looks. I think that's certainly something that could work in Kubiak's favor. So if I were grading it, I'd probably, I don't know, B-.
Give him a C+.
Okay, yeah.
We're all C's get degrees, but I could still see a lot more.
Yeah,
don't listen
I
to
have
the
a
kids.
hard
Bring
time.
home that
I
honor
don't
roll.
exactly. I don't have a good sense of where the fan base is on him, though. I think
it's very split.
Generally speaking, the fan base is pretty smart about the circumstances, and I think as much of a storyline as Kubiak was going into the season, it really faded by midseason once the injuries took its toll, and once the DA, will he stick around, will he survive this, really became the main talking point for the organization. Things just got bigger than what was happening with Klint Kubiak and the offense. So I'll be very curious to know. Leave your comments below where you guys stand with the Klint Kubiak-led offense. And if they go in a different direction outside the building, for instance, I'll just throw a name. Let's just say they go with a Joe Brady. Well, you're almost bringing back the old offense back in that regard, because that's more of where he's at with it, because he was here. He wasn't here a very long time, but he was here long enough. If you bring in a guy like another name to throw out there, I don't think Ben Johnson's coming here, but that's a different looking offense-ish. Well, no, they did run a lot of play action, but also like Kellen Moore runs that RPO thing. I don't think you keep a Klint Kubiak around with that.
That actually feeds into one of our fan questions that we were going to use for this episode. This one, a very special fan question from a man that goes by the name of Andre Johnson Sr.
Oh, Pops calling
Andre Johnson Sr. sitting in a question. Why do we keep talking about Darren Rizzy as head coach? I think we need a completely new voice regardless of how Rizzy finishes. And I've heard a lot of that throughout the fan base as well.
No doubt. And honestly, I would be perfectly fine if the organization in their head said, regardless of what Rizzy does, we're going to thank him for his service, but we need to completely turn this thing over. But I've been around this organization a long time. I know how they think. I know they like familiarity. They like to go with what they know. Sometimes there's a reluctance to think that they are where they are. There's a little bit of, I don't want to call it delusion, but perhaps some misguided optimism on where they actually are. So that's why I think they can be talked into if Rizzy goes 5-3 or 6-2 down the stretch and them keeping him. And I understand that would probably not excite anybody in the fan base, but I just know how this operation thinks. And there's the other factor as well. At some point, Rizzy is going to get interviewed for this job full time.
Yeah.
And at some point, they're going to have their list of candidates, and he's going to fall in line somewhere. Let's just say they interview 8 guys, and he's the number 5 guy on their list, and the top 4 take other jobs. Then you go like that. That's the other reason why you can't necessarily just rule him out.
Yeah, because I don't think the Saints' job will be very attractive based on certain situations, like being $60 million over the cap, not having a franchise quarterback. I think if you could choose, I would want to bring in a young offensive-minded head coach.
Absolutely.
Because as you look into the future, you're going to need a franchise quarterback. You're going to need a new running back. You're going to have to overhaul that offensive line. And I was in Cincinnati when Joe Burrow got drafted, and they had Zach Taylor, a young offensive-minded head coach. And those two really, really gelled, and it did wonders for the early part of Joe Burrow's career. And it's still showing fruit offensively. They stink defensively,
right.
but that's a different issue. So I would love to see the Saints bring in a young offensive-minded head coach. But if Rizzy finishes this season 6-2, say 7-1, I don't think they will. I think it will be more of the same. But if I had to choose, I think a young offensive head coach that can lead this team through a rebuild and into the future with a new franchise quarterback that they're eventually going to have to draft would be the ideal situation.
We'll see what happens. They got a big one this Sunday. I think they can win this game. They should win this game, because if they lose this game against a 2-win Giants team,
almost
that's
as bad as losing to the Panthers.
All right, I got 15 seconds real quick. Questionable this week is Tano Passanio and technically Kendre Miller, though he practiced all week. Out is Bub Means, Taysom Hill, Nick Saldiveri, and Bub Means is back from IR. All right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.